You're hiking through the forest on a moonless night. Absence are the familiar sounds of birds and squirrels. The warmth of the sunny day has given way to crisp, cool air. Suddenly, your heightened senses picks up an unfamiliar sound. Your breathing becomes shallow, your heart rate increases, your palms get sweaty. You are experiencing fear, a physical and psychological state that helps us survive harmful situations. It may be triggered by different events or circumstances, but we have all experienced a fear response at some point in our lives. But have you ever had such a response to a video game? Have you ever wondered how playing a game in the comfort of your own home could actually foster a feeling of fear? In this video, we are going to explore the techniques used to elicit fear in a video game. These techniques go beyond jump scares and gore. They have been used for centuries across various media, plays, books, and film. These techniques are not the only techniques used to create fear, but they are the most common ones and the most well known, and you will recognize them. Also, they don't account for basic artist greatness. In other words, some people are just naturally good at telling a fearful horror story. Take Stephen King, for instance. I'm not sure he consciously puts into his stories these techniques, but they do appear in his stories. Same with H.P. Lovecraft. These things will appear in his stories as well. But I'm not sure if he intentionally put them in the stories, or that's just the way he wrote his stories while he was writing a horror novel or novella. Anyway, let's get back to the subject at hand, and let's take a look at how fear in video games works. Most good horror games will use more than one of these techniques, but I will be selecting a horror game for each one of these techniques that I feel exemplifies the technique being discussed. One of the most effective and most used techniques of fear is isolation. This can take many forms, but it always involves isolating the main character, the main player. Games like the Silent Hill franchise use empty streets and buildings to create a sense of isolation. These liminal spaces should be filled with people, but they are not. Instead, you will find the occasional monster or creature lurking in the distance. These games go even further by sending the player to a nightmare realm of rust, blood, and horror. Since there is no controlling, entering, or leaving this other place, it maximizes the sense that you are alone. You are isolated from other humans. Creatures that you meet are hostile to you. This creates a sense of fear in the most basic way. Most games, most horror games, will use isolation to create fear. But Silent Hill and the franchise does it better than most of the games out there. It's got 2 layers, and that's really hard to beat. When Resident Evil 7 was released, many people said that it brought horror back to the franchise. They were right, but I would take this a step further. Despite all the remakes since its release, Resident Evil 7 uses fear more effectively than any other Resident Evil game. From the start, this takes what should be a normal and twists it into something unsettling. Moving through the buildings on the Baker property, they look long abandoned, in a state of disrepair, yet there are signs people live here. When you first find Mia, she acts confused and even attacks you in a possessed state. Captured by the Baker family, they treat you to a meal of disgusting rotten food. During this family gathering, they act crazy. Jack even cuts off his own son's hand. This is a great use of the second technique, distorting that which is normal. From the home to the dinner to the behavior of the Bakers, it leaves the player displaced and uncomfortable. Once dinner is over, fear becomes your companion again, as Jack begins chasing you around the dilapidated house. Resident Evil 7 makes great use of this technique throughout the game. One of the greatest moments is right after the fight in the garage with Jack. He comes back to life again after being severely beaten up, burned, and in a car accident, only to take your gun hand and do this.
I have no attention, boy. You're about to see something wonderful. Oh, fuck!
It's really disturbing, and it is unsettling, and it doesn't make any sense. And that is one of the techniques, is to take the normal and distort it so it's no longer normal and familiar. The next technique that good horror games utilize is the use of confined spaces. Confinement limits a person's ability to escape a dangerous situation. It is one of the reasons people that don't like flying, but driving doesn't bother them at all. At any time, you are able to stop the car and get out. But when flying, you are confined to the plane, for obvious reasons. The Fatal Frame games add an additional element. These games will put you in a battle in a tiny room. In the case you are watching right now, it's against two spirits at the same time. An additional advantage is given to the ghosts, as they are not confined to the physical limits of the walls of the room. They are able to move through them, to flank the player, get behind them, come at the side. Sometimes in these games, they even come out of the floor. It is an absolutely terrifying prospect that you're stuck in a room and the only way to get out is to destroy the spirit that you're fighting with a camera, and as your resources are dwindling and they're attacking from all angles, you realize that you might not get out of this alive at all. The last technique I want to discuss is used by a lot of horror games to create fear, sometimes to a better extent than others. Our sight is responsible for most of our perception of the world. It's what we lean on as humans to gather information, to learn things, to keep us safe. We rely on our sight more than sound, taste, touch, or smell. We are animals that use our sight more than any other or all other senses combined. When you limit that sight, when you limit that sense, you create a world that feels confined, but also a world in your imagination that horrible things can lurk in. You hear sounds are unnatural. Maybe the pitter-patter of feet, maybe something creaking, maybe a door opening or something breaking. And your mind goes wandering because you can't see it, so you automatically start thinking the worst. A lot of games use this technique, but I find Outlast made a better case of using this technique than most other games. In it, you have a video camera with night vision, but you are limited by the number of batteries that you carry around with you for that camcorder. And unfortunately, the batteries go very quick in this game, so you only get glimpses of what's in the darkness, and then you're wandering around in the darkness yourself, hoping that you didn't miss something or that something hasn't come into the darkness with you. It really is frightening, and combined with the other techniques, such as isolation, changing the normal and distorting it, such as this hospital of hell, it makes Outlast a really cool game to play, and it makes it a great modern horror title. So, as I mentioned before, these techniques have been used for a long time. They've been used in writing and film, and they are used to give a sense of horror and fear to those who are consuming that media. When you're watching film or reading a book, you're not an active participant like you are in video games. And video games gives that fear a whole new meaning, a whole new experience, because you are an active participant and you are engaging in the environment. You are engaging with other characters and the creatures and monsters that work in the darkness. So what do you think about these techniques? Are there games that use these techniques that you're aware of that maybe I haven't mentioned? There are a lot of horror games out there now. A lot of indie games are being made into horror games. And, you know, I played quite a few of them. As I was leading up to this, I revisited some of the Resident Evil games, Silent Hill games, Fatal Frame games. They're probably my big three franchises for horror. But I also played games like Until Dawn, Tormented Souls, and of course Outlast. So what games do you like the best in the horror genre? What games instill a sense of fear in you while you're playing them? I really would like to know, because I'm always open to playing new horror games. They do have a special interest for me. Although I play all kinds of titles myself, I have a really, really special respect for a good horror game. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you for joining me again. And once again, thank you to all my subscribers. You really are appreciated. Have a wonderful day.
Uh,